Hi everyone, I'm Janie. I might swear, I apologize if I do. I have a fucking problem with swearing. And I have a fucking problem with people telling me not to fucking swear. So, to begin this talk, I just wanted to acknowledge the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe nations, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and Huron-Wendat. While it's the Mississaugas of New Credit that signed the treaties with the Europeans, because of these great nations, we are all treaty people. So, my name's Janie. I am half and half Indigenous Colombian, which after doing some research, I found out the region my father is from, first generation Canadian. My mom's Chinese, Hong Kong Chinese, and I think that's important to say because the reality is Hong Kong Chinese has a long legacy of colonization, although my people would disagree with my comment. It's all good. So I have a very interesting upbringing with race, having been born in Canada, raised in Canada, first generation settler in Canada, subsequently got taken to Hong Kong and raised there from the ages of 8 to 16. And when I was 5, I lived in Colombia for about 5 months with my father. When I read where my father's from, he was born in Bogota. He currently lives in Medellin. It said that most Colombians in that region are of white European descent, mestizos, the local indigenous people, and Afro mixtures. So I like to joke. I work at the Native Center of Canada in Toronto. I work with the youth, and I like to joke I am the medicine wheel. Inside joke. Yeah. 4 colors, but I like to joke a lot. So it was really interesting having grown up in Canada and these kind of concepts like child abuse and whatnot, and then going to Hong Kong and telling my mom I'm gonna call CAS and finding out, yeah, there isn't a CAS in Hong Kong. Yeah, that was not a smart one on my move. And it was interesting because when I was a kid growing up in Canada, we lived in Agincourt, and it was when it was before the Hong Kong invasion. So I grew up in a mostly white school that got beat up a lot and bullied a lot. And a lot of people would say Hong Kong, what was it, Chinese, Japanese, look at these. It took me 26 years to realize what it meant, because when I was a kid, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I'm real hurt here, because that makes so much sense, right? And I got beat up a lot, and now I look back on my life and I realize part of that was racism due to the fact that I am Aboriginal presenting. I mean, the medicine pouch probably doesn't help. I do follow the spirituality. I've been adopted by Isaac Day, a medicine man of Ojibwe descent, and I follow their teachings in Canada quite closely. It's made a huge difference in my life in terms of healing. When we talk about trauma, there's so many cultures that have been through trauma, and the Aboriginal people have learned to laugh about it. It's the first time I felt at home, despite being Chinese, Colombian, born Canadian. So when I went to Hong Kong, it was traumatizing. I was really not wanting to go. I kind of was comfortable in Canada. I always thought race when I was a child was what you look like. And since everybody used to think I was Aboriginal, I thought I was Aboriginal. I didn't know this. This is before I was 8. And so I didn't understand race until I went to Hong Kong and realized I am not one of them. I am definitely not one of them. And then that question started being in my mind. It was a difficult time. I am a fat person. I am brown. I am not full-blood Chinese. I don't have a Chinese last name, being Castrillon and all, and that really does not translate into one word in Cantonese. I'm a tomboy. I'm queer identified. I didn't fit in. I was told a lot in Hong Kong, you don't act like a girl. Girls don't behave like this. Girls don't take art, they sing. Girls do this, girls do that. And so I was in this tiny, tiny little box that I was not thriving in. So I always said to Mom, I want to go home. And home to me was Canada, because I didn't feel, while there was racism in Canada, it was paled in comparison to what I had to deal with in Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong, I feel like my experience and my perspective, the minute you're born a girl in my culture, you are not valid. And the best you can aim to be is to marry a good Chinese boy and have Chinese babies, of which I have, yeah, children are not my bag. I'm a great auntie. I like to spoil. I don't like boundaries too much, so I'm not there. So it was a tough 8 years living in Hong Kong, and then that's when race really came into my mind where I didn't really fit in. And so then my way of dealing with it is I'm gonna be better than the Chinese at using chopsticks. I'm gonna pick up more marbles than that kid in the game because I'm more Chinese than Chinese. So, and then part of me with my queer politics and identity is that I didn't fit into that box of being a girl. And so I wanted to be a boy. So I lived my life actually in secret for 8 years, but it was pretty obvious as a boy. And I would get very happy when someone was like, oh, you're a great young man. I'd be like, yeah, my voice is cracking, hell yeah. So for 8 years, I lived in my head as Chris. I was not Janie, because who the fuck spells their name like that? Like, so a lot of these things kind of, like they're paper cuts, Often when we talk about racism, I think we think of it as this big assault, and it's not. I feel from my perspective, it was millions of little paper cuts that added up to this idea that I'm not worthy and that I have to prove I am worthy, that I have to prove that the air I breathe is for me. But now in my healing journey, I realize, you know what? For a moment in time, this universe colluded to make me into existence. Goddamn right I'm taking up my fucking space. And fuck you if you try to tell me otherwise. And yes, my ass is fat and needs a wider chair, but that's your problem, not mine. So, but it was a long, hard journey. I'm not gonna even sugarcoat that. Hong Kong was not the place for me. I started protesting at 14 for Tiananmen Square. That did not sit well with the Chinese family. They're like, they're gonna watch you. And I'm like, I'm Canadian. They can't do shit. So, I continue to protest to this day, so it's not much has changed. So I learned for 8 years of my life, although I came back to Canada at 16 calling myself Chinese, to silence myself, to dim my light, to dim my switch, to not be so loud, not take up so much space, not be who I was, not say what I felt, because I don't want to be the aggressive one, the troublemaker, the person who's causing problems. So I learned that from my upbringing in Hong Kong. And then I came to Canada and I got put in care. And I lived in the child and youth justice system. But then I started being an advocate. I have a big mouth, I'm sure you see. Went first, not a problem. So I became an advocate at a young age, not knowing, just feeling that there was this sense of injustice, not just towards me, but my fellow man, other kids in group homes. It started with something simple, like in the group home, the workers would get together once a year to speak about you and your treatment plan. And I said, why am I not allowed to sit in on my own treatment plan? Why am I not allowed to defend myself against accusations of being difficult? After all, I have borderline personality disorder. I am supposed to be difficult. And so I fought them, and I won. And now they're like, you should be so proud. We let the kids sit in. But I didn't get to sit in. So great for them. So that's kind of been a consistent theme in my life, is trying to fit myself into boxes and realizing I'm not a box. And I think when I look around here, I think we all have had those problems and those challenges. And what I've learned is the boxes have taught me a lot about who I'm not. So I'm thankful for those teachings. Those 8 years in Hong Kong did make me stronger and made me a hell of a tough bitch. And like, heaven forbid if you try to take my voice from me now. I don't give a shit. I am very loud. I am very big in personality. But even in Canada, I had to go through that. I didn't understand, like in queer culture, when I came out in the 90s, people would say, oh, you're bisexual. Because there was really only 3 sexualities. It was like you were gay, straight, or bi. And I was like, well, I'm kind of not gay and I'm kind of not straight. I guess I'm bi then. And then going and coming out in the gay community and being told, oh, when you're comfortable, you'll know you're gay. Or people are like, oh, you're just experimenting. When you get older, you'll be straight. And so there's another box that I didn't fit in. Now, people say I'm pansexual. I don't personally like that term because I have this image of me panning for sex. But then the other day, one of the youth at Drop-In was like, you're pansexual. I get it, because you get along with all walks of life. And I'm like, that's funny. I'm going to laugh with that one. But so I call myself queer. I also don't fit in the gender box. Was I trans? I don't know. Am I comfortable being a woman now? Sure. But there is definitely a man in me, which really bothers my heteronormative boyfriend. Like, God damn it. There's 2 strong men in this relationship, and you need to recognize. And he's just like, I'm hearing you. And it's a wonderful relationship, no complaints. But I also struggled with that box of being queer. I was at Gay Pride. I was like, woohoo, lesbians in uniform. And then there was this guy, and we got along. And then I was like, but you are a white heteronormative man that likes sports. I've heard of your kind. But you're also nice. And your family's really white, but non-judgmental. So, I mean, it's always a learning experience, I've found. So these different experiences, and even when I was traveling, and it was funny, when I was younger, I would say I'm Chinese Spanish. Or I would say I'm Chinese because I speak the language, I know the culture, whereas it's very typical of the story of Indigenous people in Canada. When you are Indigenous, you often don't know what your heritage is. You don't know much about your family. There was a lot of addictions, and God knows what my father went through being homeless at 10 years old in Colombia. So I have love for him, but I don't know much about being Colombian. So for many years I was Chinese, and then for many years I then became Chinese Spanish, and then I went to Spain to do a presentation, and when I got there I was like, oh, I'm not Spanish. No, they're assholes to us. So I'm Latina. So it's been this kind of like shopping, window shopping, like, is this me? I think, oh no, maybe not. And this me, and I love Toronto because I can talk to people of different races and background in an open way where I'm not persecuted the way I felt that I was in Hong Kong. I've learned so much. Part of my journey of healing was I had very big problems with myself in terms of like, I was a self-hating Asian. This was passed on to me by my mother, who was very racist against her own kind. And now I'm realizing the error in my ways. I felt insecure because how can I say I'm Colombian, let alone Indigenous Colombian, when I know fuck all about it? I can say, no hablo español, but like, let's be honest, that was, yeah, it was atrocious. I could totally see, like, yeah, it's atrocious, I know. And apparently when I try to speak more Spanish, there's a Chinese accent, whoa, like, right? So it's been little, like, you try to find your identity. And then it came to a point where I realized, why do I need to find my identity according to boxes? Why don't I just find what makes my heart swell? And when I was in sex work and I was very unhappy, I was like, I need something else outside of sex work to keep me sane because I'm gonna kill people. And then I found belly dance, which was funny because my belly dance friends, the first day of class was like, yeah, Janie, we remember you first day of class. You were an angry boy with tits. And I was like, that is a fair assessment. And that became this crazy journey on accepting my femininity, learning to be a woman and not look at other women as gonna be hurting me or take away from me or be evil or difficult. Now I went on this journey of learning the nurturing side of being a woman, the feeding, the eating, the dancing, the joy. And then going on this kind of crazy journey of, is this cultural appropriation, misappropriation? Am I practicing this dance? Am I just putting on a pretty costume and some Arab music and calling myself a belly dancer? Or am I really getting into the culture of the people and understanding where they're coming from and the history and the advocacy and the feminism behind belly dance? So that was a very interesting journey. And then that opened me up to spirituality. So then I started learning there were holes in my life. There's a hole in my life. I don't know what it means to be Indigenous Colombian. And I'm currently on that journey. I didn't know what it meant to be a female. I got belly dancing in my system, and I'm getting in touch with that. And then I found my elder. Don't know how I ended up on Six Nations at a sweat lodge, and then I felt like I found home. I understood him. This is an elder whose beautiful teaching is God doesn't create junk, Janie. You are beautiful. And at that time, I had never met a man that just took me for who I was and not wanted something from me. And that was a beautiful journey of learning my name, my colors, my clan. So my spirit name is White Bear Woman, and I'm a medicine woman. And I said, what the fuck do I know about being a Bear Clan? That's safety and security, two of the things I know the least. And Isaac said to me, because you know the least, you are the perfect leader to show the youth. And I said, I am not up to this job. I feel like God has planted a cruel joke on me because of all these boxes and all these messages. You're fat, you're not good enough until you're skinny, you're too brown, you're too scarred, you're too loud, you're too short, you're too tall, you're too dyke presenting, you're too this, you're too that. And now I'm in a place where I think, I just am, that's all. We're just human beings. We all have a red heart. We all bleed red. It doesn't need to be more than that. I don't care what color you are. I don't care who you are. I care about how you treat your fellow man. That when things go down, will you walk in solidarity with each other? Can you feel the pain of someone that you have nothing in common with? That's what I care about. And so this healing journey has been very difficult in some ways, because sometimes, I'm gonna be honest, I just wanna punch people in faces. Like, you're like, I have Aboriginal friends, I have white friends. It's like, no. So let's get back to dialogue and education and the positive representation of ourselves in the media. For every sad, tragic story of people of color in this country, there is 10 to 1,000 stories of triumph and success. My scars do not make me different. My scars do not make me less than. They make me strong, and they make me who I am. And so that's where I've come to be. And while I love talking about these boxes, we also sometimes do a disservice to ourselves by subscribing to these boxes more than they need to be. And so sometimes, who are you? When I look at you, what makes your heart swell? That's the question I have. All that other stuff, that's just the details, right? And, you know, at the end of the day, we can't begin to heal as a community until we do this hand in hand in a circle on that dirt. Because it is Mother Earth that will heal us. It is those teachings from the land that is through all our ancestors that will heal us. And it's only when we hold each other and give each other that space to be who we need to be at that time. If you need to define yourself by those boxes, do it, man. Fucking do it. Take up your space. Don't let anybody tell you that you are not worthy. Don't believe it for a minute, because they can only take our power if we let them. Thank you. I'm so... And now I'm shaking. Draw straws.
Let's get this up. Hello, everyone. My name's Kiri. I'm from England. I'm mixed with Sierra Leonean, Nigerian, Austrian, and English. I was raised in a very rural, small village in the Oxfordshire countryside by my parents and my brother. My mum is also mixed race. She was brought up but in a single-parent family. Her mother was white, so I feel like I was raised in an all-white family, really. I never knew my Sierra Leonean, Nigerian roots until a lot later in life. But, you know, I was fine. I grew up in a village. Colour was never an issue to me. I never felt out of place. As a family, we never really talked about, we didn't talk about race. We weren't racialized. I was proud. My mum always was instilling in us and my brother to be very confident to say where we were from: Sierra Leone, Nigerian, English, and Austrian. But apart from that, I never felt different. I never felt out of place or lost in any way. I became aware of my ethnicity and my colour more so in that early preteen stage, when you go through that transitional time we all go through. And I experienced my first, and I haven't experienced much direct racism, so I experienced a piece of direct racism. Somebody in my village told me to go back to where I'd come from, and I was like, what? I'm home right now. You know, it was weird. So moving on to school, I again went to an all-white school and secondary school, and it was very, very, very middle class, white. All the girls there were very, very privileged backgrounds. And I did feel at a time, you know, do I fit in here looking around? Not really. But again, I carried on. I never felt angry or lost or like I wasn't getting along there. But I did feel like I was missing something. I was missing some form of black influence in my life and culture, and I definitely wanted to seek that out. So as a family, as a young child into my teens, we did travel a lot as a family, and so that definitely helped, definitely influenced my identity. We traveled to Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and all of those places definitely gave me an idea of different cultures and different ways of living, and that definitely influenced my identity growing up. My mum will remind me of a time when I was little, about 6 years old. She would say, "Kiri, you once told me that you said, 'Mum, everybody in the world is brown.'" And I was like, yeah, that still resonates with me now, because I think it was brought up earlier. We aren't the minority. The world is brown, and I still really feel that today. And so, yeah, I've always had that kind of mindset, and I'm proud about that. As mixed race people, we often do look very ambiguous, and traveling a lot, I've definitely passed in for lots of different cultures, Egyptian, Puerto Rican, and that's always been, I've always seen that in a very positive light. I've enjoyed that a lot. When I arrived here in Toronto on Thursday, I got off the plane and somebody started speaking to me in Spanish, and I was like, yes, home from home. It's not really my home, but yeah, you know, it felt good. I like that. As I said, my mum was brought up by her white mum, so she definitely tried a lot to, as much as she could, to give me that black culture. But she could only go as far as she could. She would take me to London a lot, where there was obviously a much bigger black community than in our tiny white village. She would take me to get my hair done in black hair salons, small things that she could try her hardest to do, but she was dealing with a lot of her own issues, you know. She never knew her father growing up with him, so she tried her best, and I definitely appreciate that now. So as a teenager, yeah, I definitely went out and sought out a lot of black culture. I would attend like the Notting Hill Street Carnival. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's the biggest black cultural carnival in Europe, West Indian culture. And I would attend that by myself, pretty much with all my white friends. I was like, come on, we need to go here. And I needed to seek that black culture. I was like definitely lacking it and trying to find it. So when I went to university, I went the opposite way from my schooling, my all-white schooling. I went to basically 90% black and minority ethnic university. All of my friends were black Africans, some black Caribbean. So it was just the other polar extreme, which also I loved. Definitely black culture in terms of music, food, dress sense, a lot of things I felt a much more affinity with than how I'd done it at school with the white majority around me. So after university, I felt a lot more balanced in myself. I felt like, yeah, I've had these influences from both sides now, and I feel good about myself. I don't feel lacking anymore in either way. I studied sociology at university, and that was great for me. I loved learning about society and culture and race and all these things that were in my mind anyway, and being able to learn more about them and study them, and realizing that I could maybe make this interest into a career and a path was really exciting and liberating and really cool. So I decided to write my dissertation on mixed race identity. It was around the time of the inauguration of Barack Obama. So it seemed fitting to link those two things together. Getting a group of mixed race people from my university together and just having this conversation like we're doing today was amazing. And I felt a lot of the same things that I feel a lot of us are feeling today. And so just set me off on that course of feeling good about researching and being a social researcher and being in the field of racial identity, especially mixed race identity. I spent the next 5 years or so following university in London, working. Obviously, London's a massive, diverse city, over 9 million people. There's people from all backgrounds and races, cultures, probably that you could ever think they're there. I know a lot of people in this room have been to London, so you know what I'm talking about. My friendship group now is very mixed up, different cultures, backgrounds, just reflecting my upbringing, and I'm really happy with who I have around me right now, because that influence has shaped me, and I'm all for mixing and influencing and educating and learning. Mixed race now in England is considered the fastest growing grouping according to the census. I know there's been lots of talk about the census today and how really valid that is. But yeah, but I have noticed that in my environment in England, where I grew up, it is a lot more diverse now. There are black people coming there. So, you know, that's exciting for me, and I feel good about it. I feel lucky to have been grown up in England when I did. For the most part, I had a very liberal upbringing. My parents surrounded me with lots of different kinds of people. As I said, we traveled a lot. And I feel lucky about that. I know a lot of mixed race people wouldn't have had those same opportunities to feel at ease growing up. So that has been a big positive influence on my life, and I'm very grateful for that. A lot of mixed race people in my kind of generation are now known as the Jessica Ennis generation. She's an Olympian who was in the she's an athlete. Sorry, she was in the Olympics last year. She's mixed race. She grew up in the 80s, 90s. So it's this kind of generation. They've coined the term Jessica Ennis generation, because there's a lot of us out there now, and it feels nice to be grouped in that way. I see it as a positive thing, definitely. Although I do identify as being mixed race, I'm extremely proud of who I am. I have never really felt obligated or felt the need to pigeonhole myself in that way. Mixed race in itself gives me the fluidity and the freedom to flow into other areas and be who I want to be when I want to be. And that freedom is what I value so much in life. My choice of career as a social researcher really overlaps with my personal interests, and to such a large extent. And I passionately believe in equality, and specifically racial equality. And I do really long for a world and society that is beyond race. I believe I can make a difference in this area by giving a voice to those people that may not be heard, by researching, interviewing people, surveying people, holding discussion groups such as we're doing today. And giving those voices to, and taking that information and giving it to people that are not listening. I feel it's really important. Also being mixed, I feel I have a privilege. I have that viewpoint and the understanding of whiteness and blackness, and I feel a sense of duty to use this standpoint to educate others and to try and make a world where we can all feel as comfortable as I do. I feel it's important, and we all deserve that and have that right to feel comfortable in who we are. England is a great place to be a social researcher. We have a lot of organisations and academic institutions and support this kind of work. I've travelled a lot, and it's not like that everywhere. So I am very lucky to be from England in that sense. Coming from Oxford as well, a city which actively promotes itself as a city of learning. I feel very empowered and encouraged to continue my work as a researcher, because I feel like it's important. In this area of this field, it's quite niche, being focused on mixed race, crossing over from the academia of sociology. I do have role models in this field, and I feel like that is only because I'm from England, which is such a diverse place in certain areas. In London, for example. A lecturer at Goldsmiths University in London, Emma Dabiri. She's mixed Irish and Nigerian. Some of you may have heard her. She's written a lot extensively. Definitely inspiration to me. So having the freedom to call myself mixed, but knowing that I don't need to really fit into that box if I don't want to, is very important to me. After studying sociology, I believe the term mixed race to be part of the racialized thinking that was employed to separate and dehumanize Africans, to justify enslaving them. And, separating them and calling them black and the enslavers calling themselves white. So the term mixed race really is just adding a further category to this social, political, and historical racist segregation that encourages shadism and makes us hate our own color. And this is what I despise. I don't really ascribe to that thinking. I am proud to be a product of mixed cultures and of colors, and I would much prefer to change the system and eradicate this classification based on color forever. So the term mixed race for me is more just that, a term. I don't really put much weight on it. It's more about the sense of ownership and self-worth that I feel when I call myself mixed race, as it embodies so many positive things and means so much to me. And that's what I ascribe to. I definitely feel I have my own identity from growing up in an all-white neighborhood and seeking out the more black, African, Caribbean culture to spending time in brown, mixed countries such as Puerto Rico. I know I'm very content with who I am now, and I feel proud and accepted at home in all of these places. I'm able to fit into all groups I choose to spend my time around. I never lose my sense of who I am because I know inside who I am, and that's all that matters to me, really. Even if some groups still will say to me, if black Africans say to me, oh, you're not as black as us, for example, if they were to say that, not that they do, or you're a light-skinned girl, that's fine. I know who I am. Having the ability to choose what I want to be when I want to be is freedom, and it is when others try to box us as mixed race people and when they choose for us, that's when we need to resist, I feel, as this is what links us back to the racialized society of which I am opposed. The sense of belonging for me now is all about being around like-minded people. Being here today at this event just speaks that in volumes. It's not about finding somewhere that I belong, it's about connecting with those who may share similar experiences to me, interests in society, traveling, etc. Being mixed race does not mean we're all going to get along, as the media would hope for us to believe, But we may have some shared experiences, and that's what I would hope to connect and find the commonalities around. But meeting people whose parents went outside of their norm, back in the day, like my grandmother, she was born in 1920. For her to have a relationship with a black man at that time, it was crazy. So to meet other people's parents who've gone through that, it's always going to be of interest to me and important for me. I want to hear those stories, Being here among all of you today and involved in this event is inspiring in so many ways, and I'm hoping to use this inspiration to create something similar or something as useful back at home. I think it's a really important chance to give us a voice. As I said, that we often, as mixed race people, we don't hear that voice. I want to thank all of the organizers, for all of your work in putting this together. It's amazing. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. I see giving people the opportunity to feel part of something and to give back to the younger generation as really important, and to promote self-worth, self-love, and a positive self-identity. So thank you.
Hello. So I'll just hold the microphone. I talk with my hands a lot, so you'll probably just see me using my hands a lot. But as in my introduction, my name is Joanna. I'm from the border over whatever south direction would be. I think it's important to say that I'm from Virginia because that's where anti-miscegenation really all started. And I was raised in Maryland, right outside of DC. My father is black. I joked around last night at dinner that he's just a black guy from Washington, DC. And then my mom is from Nicaragua in Central America. But I do have Native American on both sides. My mom is a Cherokee while my dad is Iroquois. And then I think there's some English, German, something going on, because my grandma, she is super white, and my great-grandmother is super white. So if you just look at my family, it's just shadism clearly across the board. But the things that I wanted to talk about, because when I was preparing for this, being the academic that I am and thinking about, okay, what am I going to say? Do I have to research things and write down all these notes? But the few things that I thought about talking about like mixed race internationally, since we're all talking about that aspect, is really kind of this idea of the black-white binary within the United States and kind of growing up with that binary in mind. I grew up in Montgomery County, which is known as white bread, right outside of DC, where everything is political, everything is run by white people. And a lot of the people that I grew up with were super white, super bougie, super middle class. Let's all go to the mall, buy Abercrombie and Fitch, and talk like this. And so I kind of, I guess in a way, internalized that. And internalize that whiteness. And as I get older, I really realize how much whiteness kind of still is embodied in a lot of who I am and what I do. And it doesn't really help that I sound white, and people kind of talk to me on the phone and they're like, they meet me in person, they're like, whoa, that's not what I thought you were gonna look like. But just kind of dealing with that throughout my life. So when I was little, I had a really diverse group of friends, and I still like to call them the United Nations of friends, because I didn't really see color. It didn't really matter to me. I don't care who you were, what you looked like. If you were cool, I was cool with you. But then one day I came home from preschool because everyone in my class was telling me that I was white, and I was a lot lighter when I was younger. And so I just thought that was a cool thing. Like, oh, my friends are white, they say I'm white, I guess that means I'm white. And I walk home and I tell my parents, you know, I'm white. And at the time, we lived with my grandma, and my grandma's black, and she's like, you better check Joanna, because that is not going to be happening in this household. Like, she told my dad, you know, wait a minute, time out. She has to change schools. And so, but like I said, throughout my time living in Montgomery County, that was always kind of a piece that I had to be kind of this skinny, cosmopolitan, teen Vogue kind of girl. You know, I had to be small and fit into the Abercrombie and Fitch clothes, even though my booty was not going to do it, but I had to, because that was what was a part of the culture that I lived in. And even now to this day, like, I still kind of have that whiteness instilled in me. And it's something that, I guess, as I continue to get older and kind of find out who I am, that it really is important when we think of like checking a box or kind of putting yourself in a certain situation, that you don't have to, it's okay to not be one or the other. And one of my biggest kind of complexes is that I've always felt smack in the middle, that I was never black enough to be with the black kids because I'm not dark enough. I don't really listen to rap music. I'm not like the culture, I guess, that I would say, which is very stereotypical, mind you. But then I never really felt that I was Hispanic enough. Like, okay, I eat quesadillas and I like tacos, but I don't really know what else that means. And so I always felt like I had to, in a way, I probably identified more being white, because it's like, well, I sound like it, I'm smart, I was a nerd, still am to this day. Like, maybe that's what I am, and I'm probably not even black or Spanish. And so, like I said, it's something that I've always kind of thought about. But I think it really is just this United States black-white binary, that if you're not one, you're the other, and you can't be both. And like I said, it's something that I've always really struggled with. And it's really sad, because I feel that no matter what mix you are, you shouldn't have to feel that you have to choose, and you shouldn't feel like you aren't good enough to be one or the other. And I still feel that way sometimes today, that, you know, I look at myself and I'm like, well, I don't really look black, whatever that means. I don't really look Hispanic or Latina. See, when I talk, it sounds like I'm Hispanic, like, oh yeah. But again, it's something that I kind of just struggle with, and I think it just comes from being within the United States and having to deal with that. But luckily, again, I have blinders. I've always had tons of friends who were just from different cultures, different backgrounds. My parents never really raised me to see color. My dad, although he always reminded me, you are black, like point blank. When you go around and navigate the world, yes, you're a female, yes, you're Hispanic, but everyone's gonna see you as black. That's what you are. And again, I think that just goes to the black-white binary in the US, that you have to choose. But thankfully, my parents have never really forced color or race on me, even though my internal struggle was always trying to figure out, am I good enough for one or the other? My mom, she's been in the United States from Nicaragua since like the 70s, and she's never went back. So maybe that's a part of why I never really felt Hispanic or Latina enough, because I never really had that connection to Nicaragua in any way. And I feel within the conversations that I've had today, I'm kind of continuing to learn about myself and really learning about my mixed race identity. And I think a lot of people today have talked about how it really is a journey. It really is this kind of fluid ebb and flow of some days you're gonna feel one thing, some days you're gonna feel another. And even though I'm 27, I still probably don't really fully understand who I am, what I identify as. But for the most part, that's okay. And I think a part of the journey is really just trying not to feel guilty about it, and that, okay, well, if I don't really feel like I'm good enough for one or the other, it's not that it's a bad thing and that it's my normal. So yeah, that was like the biggest piece that kind of really stuck with me in terms of kind of preparing for this panel and talking about it. But I like to think that, again, because of the space that I come from, like I never really saw, I kind of like resonated with Kiri in terms of like, I never really was, I guess, felt racism against me. And then when I was actually thinking about it and hearing you talk, I was like, oh my gosh, there are tons of times where I've gotten like bad looks or dirty looks. So my dad, like I said, being Black, when we're together, and he's younger than my mom, my parents are 11 years apart. And so when we're together, people actually think that he's like my boyfriend or my brother, and it's really awkward and weird because people are like, oh, like, and they just make really random comments. And then when I'm with my mom, they think that she's like my grandma because she looks really old and she's like this tiny little Spanish lady. And so then that's really weird. But then when we're all together, it's really weird. And being, it's like super weird. We used to travel up, we still do travel up and down the eastern seaboard. We would go to Florida for summer vacations every year. And we still have family in Florida, up in New York. But once you get past like South Carolina and you hit Georgia, like there's a problem. You go outside, and me walking with my mom is a problem because it's like, okay, these two foreigners, we look Hispanic and Latina, and we just get bad looks and people walking away. But then my dad's walking with us, and it's like, what? Who the hell let them out like within this space? And it's just so, and it's funny because like I said, I think back to when I was a kid and seeing like certain people would give us dirty looks. And like I said, when I was younger, I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, oh, well, like we're not from here. So maybe they're just like, oh, out of towners, how weird. And then there was one time when we actually had something kind of bad happen to us. So I got my undergraduate in West Virginia, which if anyone has ever been there, it's like super boony and nobody's really there, tons of white people. And my father and I were going to go shopping, and he opened the door for a white lady, and I've never seen somebody jump back and just be so afraid. And he was just going to open the door to like the grocery store, like just being a courteous gentleman, you can go first. And she jumped back and was just like, oh my gosh, looked at me like, oh my gosh, and just ran into the grocery store. And it was really weird. But again, I feel like there's these different points throughout my life that I can tell that me and who I am and what I look like really does go against this, like I said, black-white binary, this sense of whiteness that's within the United States, and that it's so deeply rooted, and that it really does affect, again, how I feel and how I never really feel like I'm good enough for one or the other. And I think it's hard because as much as I get those dirty looks from white people, I've still had to navigate the space of, am I Black enough or am I Hispanic enough? I've had dark-skinned Black girls totally hate me and totally say bad things against me because they think, well, you're lighter, and they've pretty much made it seem like you think you're better than us type thing. I've had Hispanics who are like, you can't speak Spanish, so what makes you think that you're even, you can even justify being Latina? And so all of these different experiences. But again, I don't even know how to describe it. I think it's just my personality that I just put the blinders on and I'm like, whatever. And some people may call it naive, and some people may think that I'm trying to be colorblind, even though I don't try to be. But I really just kind of take it as a grain of salt and just like, whatever. If you want to hate on me and have something bad to say, that's okay, but I'm still going to try and see everyone for who they are and not necessarily see color and see those differences. And I feel like we talked about that earlier, that we need to talk more about what makes us the same and not necessarily what makes us different. Like, as a criminologist, there's a theory called labeling theory. And whatever label is placed on you, whether you're a criminal, whether you're a mixed race, like, it stays with you for the rest of your life, and you can never break out of that label. But it's like, well, why do we even need labels? Why do I have to feel like I'm in the middle of Black and Hispanic when I'm both? These layers that Kim had talked about earlier, you know, I'm everything all at once. But like I said, it's still kind of a journey that I know that I'm going through. And sometimes I wish I wasn't going through that, because I really do feel defensive at times. And there have been moments where some of my friends or people that I don't even know are like, okay, like, you don't have to prove it to me. And I just feel like, no, like, listen to me, like, this is what I am, and please believe me. But I know that, you know, it's kind of just, I guess it just comes with the territory. But I like to hear the more positive stories, that there are people who don't really feel like they have to show that evidence and show that, you know, oh, this is who I am, and please believe it. But I guess I'm just kind of different, and I'm like, no, like, I really am Black. Like, look at my dad. Like, I really am Hispanic. Look at my mom. And so, but again, I think it just goes back to that United States perspective of the Black-white binary and labels and categories and the census and all of that political mumbo jumbo of what it means to define someone or something based off of who they are and where they come from. But I mean, as much as it was interesting growing up in Maryland, I still love Maryland, DC, Virginia. I still call that home. And now that I'm in Chicago, and I've been in Chicago for 5 years in graduate school, it's a whole different ball game. Most people just think I'm Hispanic, and then randomly some people think I'm Black, but then most of the time I get the question of, you know, obviously, what are you? You know, all different types of guesses and everything. But I think the biggest thing that I've kind of taken, again, this personal journey and this fluidity, you don't have to fit into these boxes and these categories, and that it's okay to, like I said, feel like one thing, not feel like something. I'm just thankful that I'm able to say whatever it is that I have to say in the space that I have to say it. Being an academic, female, minority, queer, I could not have the opportunity that I have. My parents didn't go to college, so everything that kind of comes to me, again, that may make me sound naive, but I'm just like, it's okay. Like, everything will be fine. Everyone who knows me knows that I'm kind of like that utopia. I'm a Pisces, so maybe that's why. I'm like that utopia dreamer, like, everybody's cool, like, we're all, you know, like, hippie love, like, it's terrible. But yeah, so that's me in a nutshell, I guess. If you ever want to come to DC, feel free. Chicago, anybody who wants to come to the U.S., we're not as bad as I may make it. But yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone as well. I know that we have like so much left to do, but thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, international panel. You are wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.